Silence is never truly silent. It is a tapestry of frequencies, a low-level hum of electricity, settling wood and distant traffic that most people tune out, but to me, it is a language. I sat in the high-backed wing chair of my bedroom, the room dark save for the amber glow of the streetlight filtering through the heavy drapes. I am Elias Vance. I am 76 years old. My hands are spotted with age. My knees grind like mortar and pestle when I stand. But my ears are still the finest instruments I possess. For 40 years, I was a sound engineer. I mixed the explosions for action movies and the whispered confessions for dramas. I know how to isolate a footstep in a rainstorm. I know how to pull a voice out of static. My family thinks I am deaf. "Dad!" That was Karen, my daughter-in-law. She screams at me in a voice pitched to shatter glass, assuming my hearing aids are turned up to maximum volume. In reality, they are usually off when she is in the room. But tonight, they are on. Tonight, they are tuned. I reached up and adjusted the tiny dial behind my left ear. I had modified these units myself, bypassing the safety limiters and boosting the gain on the directional microphones. I could hear the refrigerator compressor cycling on in the kitchen down the hall. I could hear the drip of the faucet in the guest bathroom. I live in the guest wing of my son David's estate, a sprawling modern monstrosity paid for with the sale of my own modest home and a substantial chunk of my retirement fund. They moved me in 6 months ago after I left the water running in the bathtub. An accident, I said. A sign, they said. "It's not safe for you to be alone, Dad," David had told me, his eyes wet with performative concern. "Come live with us." Care. That word has become a prison. Since moving in, I have been treated like a piece of furniture that occasionally needs dusting and feeding. They smile to my face, shouting simple sentences as if my brain has atrophied along with my cochlea, while behind my back they strip mine my bank accounts. I signed a power of attorney while foggy on Percocet after my hip replacement. I thought I was signing admission papers for rehab. By the time the fog lifted, they had the keys to the kingdom. It was Tuesday evening. The air pressure in the house felt heavy, dense with a static charge that pricked the hairs on my arms. It was the stillness before a tornado. I sat in the dark, focusing. The house was quiet. Too quiet.
Then I heard it. A low murmur, voices. They were coming from the kitchen, 3 rooms away. To a normal ear, they would be indistinguishable from the hum of the HVAC system. To me, they were crystal clear. "He's still kicking, David," Karen's voice hissed. It was sharp, agitated. "The doctor said his heart was weak. He said any shock could do it, but he's like a cockroach." I froze. My breath caught in my throat. "I know," David replied. I heard the clink of ice against glass. Scotch. He always drank scotch when he was guilty. "But the balloon payment on the business loan is due on the 15th. That's 10 days, Karen. If we don't have the insurance money by then, we lose everything. The house, the cars." My own son. The boy I taught to ride a bike without training wheels. The man whose debts I had quietly paid off a dozen times over the last 20 years. He wasn't talking about my health. He was talking about my expiration date. He was calculating the ROI on his father's death. "We can't wait for nature," Karen said. Her voice dropped an octave, becoming guttural, almost a growl. My hearing aid caught it, amplifying the malice until it sounded like she was whispering directly into my ear canal. "We have to help it along. The gas line in the basement." David sounded strangled. "If the pilot light goes out," Karen continued, her voice gaining speed and confidence, "it's a slow leak, natural gas, or carbon monoxide if we clog the flue. It'll just fill the guest wing. It's right above the utility room. He'll just go to sleep and never wake up. It happens to old people all the time. Faulty equipment." David hesitated. "That's dangerous, Karen. What if the house blows
blow up if there's no spark," she snapped. "And we won't get caught because who checks the heater maintenance? It's old, just like him. It's plausible deniability, David. Do you want to be homeless?" I sat there, paralyzed not by age, but by a grief so profound it felt like my chest was caving in. They were planning to gas me. They were planning to turn my sanctuary into a gas chamber so they could collect on a life insurance policy I took out to protect them. If you are listening to this, and you think your family is your safety net, check the ropes. Make sure they aren't tying a noose while you sleep. I wish someone had warned me that the people who claim to take care of you are sometimes the ones digging the hole.
Panic flared, hot and bright, urging me to run, to scream, to call 911. But I pushed it down. I forced the technician in my brain to take over. Panic is noise. Survival requires a clean signal. My word against theirs was useless. I was the confused old man, the senile father who left the water running. If I called the police now, David would smooth talk them. He would say I was hallucinating. He would say I was off my meds. They would pat me on the head and leave me here, defenseless. I needed proof. I needed their voices on record. I stood up. My knees popped loudly in the silent room. Crack, crack. I froze, waiting to see if they heard. They didn't. They were too busy plotting. I moved to my closet. I pushed aside the row of flannel shirts I no longer wore and reached for the shoebox on the top shelf. Inside, nestled in foam, was my field recorder, a Zoom H6 portable unit with an XY microphone capsule. It was professional-grade gear I had saved from my studio days. I checked the batteries, full charge. I inserted a fresh SD card. I crept to the bedroom door. I opened it a crack, just an inch. I placed the recorder on the floor, pointing the microphones down the hallway toward the kitchen. I put on my headphones and adjusted the levels. The red light blinked. Recording. "I'll go check the valve now," David said. His voice was resigned, heavy. "I'll make sure it looks rusted, loose." "Good," Karen commanded. "Give him his sleeping pill first, the strong one. Make sure he's out cold." I scrambled back to my chair. I shoved the recorder under the seat cushion, hiding it but leaving the mics exposed. I grabbed the book from the side table, a thriller I hadn't opened in weeks, and slumped back, feigning sleep. Footsteps. Soft, padded steps on the carpet. The door handle turned. Karen walked in. She was smiling. It was a terrible, shark-like smile that didn't reach her eyes. In her hand, she held a steaming cup of tea and a small paper cup with a single blue pill. "Celicia," she shouted. "Dad?" I stirred, blinking rapidly, acting the part of the startled geriatric. "What? Who? Oh, Karen." "It's bedtime, Dad," she said, speaking slowly and loudly. "Time for your vitamin." I looked at the pill. It wasn't a vitamin. It was a benzodiazepine, strong enough to knock out a horse. I looked at her. I saw the murderer in her eyes, masked by a thin veneer of domesticity. "Thank you, dear," I mumbled. I took the pill. I put it in my mouth. I tucked it under my tongue. I took the tea. I sipped it. It was hot, scalding my lip. Karen stood there, watching my throat. She wasn't leaving until she saw me swallow. I gulped the tea. "There. Good," she said. She took the cup from my hand. "Sleep tight, Dad. Don't worry about anything." "Good night," I whispered. She turned and left, closing the door until it clicked. I waited 5 seconds. 10. I leaned over and spit the pill into my handkerchief. It was starting to dissolve, bitter and chemical. I wiped my mouth. I wasn't sleeping tonight. I stood up. I moved the heavy oak dresser in front of the door. It scraped against the floor, a sound I prayed they wouldn't hear over the noise of their own treachery. I went to the bathroom. I soaked a towel in water and shoved it into the crack beneath the doorframe. I taped around the edges of the door with painter's tape I kept in my desk drawer. I was sealing myself in. Then I went to the window. I opened it just a crack, an inch at the top, hidden by the heavy drapes. The cold night air rushed in, clean and sharp. I sat back in my chair. I pulled the recorder out from under the cushion. I put the headphones back on. I listened. Below me, in the basement, I heard it. Clink, clink, metal on metal, a wrench hitting a pipe. Hiss, a low, sibilant sound, the sound of gas escaping under pressure. My son was loosening the line. He was turning my home into a bomb or a gas chamber, depending on how the night went. Terror clawed at my throat. I wanted to vomit. I wanted to weep, but I held the recorder steady.
I watched the levels on the digital display bounce from green to yellow. I was terrified, but I was also recording. And tomorrow, the silence they wanted to impose on me, the eternal silence of the grave, would become the loudest sound they had ever heard. I settled in for the long vigil, waiting for the morning, waiting for the air to turn poison, and waiting for the moment I could press play. A vigil of terror is a silent thing. It is the space between the intake of breath and the scream. I sat by the cracked window, my body wrapped in the wool blanket I had pulled from the closet, breathing the cold night air as if it were a communion wine. The house was quiet, but it wasn't empty. Below me, in the guts of the basement, I could hear the hiss. It was a low frequency, a sibilant whisper that traveled through the ductwork like a snake.
Sssss. My modified hearing aid picked it up, amplifying the death rattle of the loosened valve. It was the sound of my son trying to erase me. The smell of rotten eggs, mercaptan, the additive they put in natural gas to warn the living, began to seep into the hallway. I could smell it through the cracks I hadn't taped. But in my room, with the window open and the wet towel jammed under the door, the air remained thin but breathable. I didn't sleep. I didn't dare. I sat in the dark, the recorder cradled in my lap, watching the levels bounce on the tiny digital screen. Every creak of the house settling sounded like a footstep. Every gust of wind sounded like an intruder. I thought about David. I thought about the boy who used to build Lego towers in this very room. I thought about the man who was currently lying in bed upstairs, holding his wife, waiting for his father to suffocate. The sun rose gray and bleak, filtering through the heavy drapes. It was 7 a.m. I heard them. Footsteps on the stairs. Soft, hesitant. They were coming down to check the trap. I pressed the record button again, ensuring I captured the finale. "Go check," Karen's voice whispered from the hallway. It was tight with anxiety. "The smell is strong up here." "I can't," David whispered back. "What if the gas is still too strong?" "Open the windows in the hallway first," Karen commanded. "Air it out, then check. Remember the script, David. You found him. You panicked. You called 911 screaming." I heard the sash of the hallway window slide open. A rush of fresh air moved through the corridor. Steps approached my door. I gripped the arms of my chair. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my hands were steady. The doorknob turned. It rattled. Then a thud. The door hit the heavy oak dresser I had dragged in front of it. "It's blocked," David said, his voice pitched up in panic. "Maybe he fell against it," Karen hissed. "Maybe he tried to get out and collapsed." "It's heavy," David grunted. I heard the strain in his voice as he threw his shoulder against the wood. The dresser scraped across the floor. Screech. The door opened 6 inches. Then a foot. David poked his head in. He was holding a handkerchief over his nose and mouth. He squinted into the gloom of the room. He expected to see a corpse. He expected to see his father slumped on the floor, blue-lipped and silent. Instead, he saw me. I was sitting in the armchair, facing the door.
I was fully dressed in my best suit, charcoal gray, pressed, with a crisp white shirt. I had shaved in the dark. I looked like I was waiting for a business meeting. I held the recorder in my lap, the red light glowing steady and bright. "Good morning, David," I said. My voice was steady. It was deep, resonant, projected from the diaphragm. It wasn't the voice of a confused old man. It was the voice of a sound engineer who knew how to fill a room. David screamed. It wasn't a word. It was a noise of pure primal terror. He stumbled back, tripping over his own feet, and fell hard against the hallway wall. "K," he gasped, sliding down the wallpaper. "You're—" I asked. Karen rushed into the doorway. She saw me. She saw the towel at the bottom of the door. She felt the cold draft from the open window behind the drapes. Her face went pale, her eyes darting around the room as she realized the gas hadn't touched me. "K," she stammered, trying to pivot to the script. We
We smelled gas, Arthur. I asked. I stood up. I didn't need my cane. I walked toward them, stopping just inside the threshold. And? I asked. Karen's eyes widened. We never... That's crazy. I lifted the recorder. I held it up like a holy relic. Let's check the playback, I said. I pressed the button. Their voices filled the room. The audio was pristine, captured by the high-end microphones, amplified by the acoustics of the hallway. It's a slow leak. It'll just fill the guest wing. Give him his sleeping pill first. The color drained from their faces. They looked at each other, the reality of their failure crashing down on them like a collapsing roof. The evidence wasn't just physical. It was sonic. It was undeniable. That's... Karen shrieked, her voice cracking. We were talking about the rats. I asked, my voice cold. And the insurance money. The balloon payment on the business loan. David scrambled to his feet. He looked at the recorder. He looked at me. The fear in his eyes was replaced by a sudden, desperate violence. K! He shouted. He lunged. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just looked at him. I wouldn't, I said calmly. K! He snarled, advancing on me, his hands reaching for the device. You're an old man. Give it to me, or I'll take it. I'll... Crash. The front door downstairs exploded inward. Police! Heavy boots thundered up the stairs. The sound was a rhythmic, disciplined pounding that shook the floorboards. David froze.
His hands hovered inches from the recorder. I texted my old friend, Detective Miller, at 4 a.m., I said. He's been parked down the street in an unmarked van, listening to the live feed from this recorder for the last hour. He heard you trying to break in. Detective Miller appeared in the doorway, his gun drawn, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. Miller was a big man, a veteran who had seen the worst of humanity, but the look he gave David was one of pure, unadulterated disgust. "David Vance, Karen Mance," Miller barked. "Step away from him." David backed away, raising his hands. "It's a misunderstanding. My dad is senile." "You are under arrest," Miller continued, holstering his weapon but keeping his hand on it. Karen screamed. She tried to run past the officers, but they grabbed her. "He's lying! He set us up!" "The gas company is downstairs," Miller said, his voice flat. "They just confirmed the valve was manually loosened with a wrench. The threads were stripped. And we found a pipe wrench in your garage with your prints on it, David." David collapsed. His legs gave out, and he fell to his knees on the carpet. He started to sob, ugly, heaving sounds that echoed in the hallway. "I needed the money, Dad," he wailed. "I'm sorry. The loan sharks." I looked down at him. I looked at the son I had raised, the man I had protected for 40 years. I saw the weakness. I saw the rot. "So you decided to kill me instead," I said. I felt something snap inside my chest. It wasn't my heart. It was the last tether of fatherhood, the last instinct to protect him. "You aren't my son," I said. The officers hauled them up. I watched as the handcuffs clicked on David's wrists. I watched as Karen spat at me, screaming obscenities, her face twisted into a mask of hate. They were dragged out of the house, past the neighbors who had gathered on the lawn to watch the spectacle. I saw the shame on David's face as he was shoved into the back of a squad car. I saw the realization that his life was over. The house grew quiet. The police tape was put up. The gas company shut off the main line. I was left alone in the guest room. The air was clearing. The smell of rotten eggs was fading, replaced by the crisp morning breeze. Detective Miller walked back in. He looked tired. "Are you?" he asked. "I am," I said. "We'll need a statement," Miller said. "And the recording. You have it."
I said, handing him the device. Miller took it. He looked around the room.
What will you do now? The house is a crime scene. I have my own house, I said, the one they rented out. I'm evicting the tenants. I straightened my tie. And then, I said, I'm going to build a studio, a soundproof one. I walked out of the guest wing. I walked down the stairs, leaning on the banister but moving under my own power. I walked out the front door of the house that was supposed to be my tomb. I stepped into the sun. I reached up and adjusted my hearing aid. I turned the volume down. The sirens faded. The chatter of the neighbors muted. The silence was beautiful. It wasn't empty. It was the sound of survival. The nightmare was over. The signal was clear, and I was still here to broadcast it.